The HOA tried to demolish my house. The problem is, I wasn't in their HOA. They sent fake officers to my driveway. They forged demolition notices from the city, and they demanded $18,000 to fix the neighborhood aesthetic. But they made one critical mistake. I record everything. And this is the story of how their little empire collapsed, brick by brick. But before the war, before the lawsuits and the flashing lights, there was just silence. When I left Boston, there was no dramatic explosion behind me, no shouting match in the street, no scandal on the 6 o'clock news. It was just exhaustion, years of noise, clutter, responsibility, and a marriage that had died quietly long before the papers were signed. The day the divorce was finalized, the courthouse hallway felt quieter than any home I'd lived in for the last decade, and that quiet did something to me. It reminded me that I hadn't felt peace, real, bone-deep peace, in years. So, I packed up what I needed, sold what I didn't, liquidated the last of my antique business, and drove south until the cold Atlantic wind couldn't find me anymore. I didn't plan on Virginia. Honestly, I didn't plan on anything. Then I saw the listing. It wasn't even a proper listing, just 3 washed-out photos and a line that read, "Pre-war home, as is, needs full restoration." Most folks would have scrolled right past it, looking for granite countertops and open concepts. But when I pulled into that long, crunching gravel drive and saw the house in person, it felt like déjà vu, like something was waiting for me. It was a 1940s mansion, abandoned, weather-beaten, and leaning like a man who had been standing too long in a strong wind. The stucco was peeling in wide curls, the stained glass windows were cracked like old china, and Spanish tiles were broken and scattered across the lawn like teeth. But beneath the dust and the rot, I could feel the history. Good bones. Solid craftsmanship. The kind of home someone built with pride because they thought their grandchildren would still be living in it. The neighborhood around it, though, was the exact opposite. Stonecrest. Perfect driveways, perfect shutters, perfect mailboxes. The kind of place where even the birds probably had to file noise complaints before they chirped. And there, sitting at the far edge like a stubborn relic refusing to die, was my house. The listing agent whispered, "It's a teardown," like she was telling me a secret the house shouldn't hear. But I didn't see a teardown. I saw a second chance. Maybe for me more than the building. So I paid $180,000 cash, less than what half the folks in Stonecrest spent on their shiny new SUVs, and she blinked when I handed over the cashier's check like she was waiting for a punchline. But there wasn't one. I drove back that afternoon with a rented truck full of hand tools, tarps, and a box of old jazz records. If I was going to rebuild something, my life, my house, I wanted to do it slow and honest. For a while, the only sound in my days was the rhythm of work. Hammer on wood, tile against tile, the sigh of old beams settling as if they were grateful to be touched again. And in the evenings, when I sat on the decaying porch with a cup of strong coffee, I could almost hear the past breathing. But even in that quiet, I felt eyes on me. Across the street, behind a curtain that never fully closed, stood a woman. Tight blonde bun, pearls, posture like she swallowed a broom handle. She didn't smile, didn't wave, just watched. Sometimes she'd nudge another neighbor and gesture toward my roof or the scaffolding or the pile of reclaimed lumber by my truck. Always with that look, a mixture of suspicion and superiority. Back then, I didn't know her name. I didn't know she was Karen Bullock, the self-appointed queen of Stonecrest. I didn't know she'd one day send fake officers to my gate, forge demolition notices, or try to shake me down for $18,000. All I knew was this. For the first time in years, I had a place worth protecting. A place with history. A place no one, especially not some HOA tyrant, was going to take from me. And unfortunately for Stonecrest, peace is something I'm willing to fight for. When you spend years collecting antiques, handling delicate things built long before you were born, you develop a sort of reverence for craftsmanship. Tools from the 1920s still work if you treat them right. Furniture from the 1880s still stands if you understand the grain. And old houses respond to patience the way people do. So the first few months in Virginia were simple, honest. I woke with the sun, even though I'd never been a morning person in Boston. There's something about the way daylight hits a broken window that makes you want to stand up and fix it. The roof came first. Spanish tiles, most cracked, some shattered, a few holding on like old soldiers refusing to fall. I spent a week carefully lifting them, stacking what could be saved, ordering replacements from a small outfit in Colorado that still hand-presses clay tiles the way craftsmen did a century ago. Then came the porch. Layers of beige paint hid something beautiful beneath, a hint of Art Deco ironwork. Not fancy, not loud, just elegant in the understated way Americans used to build when form and function weren't enemies. The garden was next, or what was left of it. When I bought the place, the shrubs had grown wild and angry, twisting into each other like they were trying to strangle the old flower beds. But if you looked close, really looked, you could see the ghost outlines of symmetry, raised beds, old brick edging, a pattern someone had drawn with intention back in 1946. So I researched, dug into archives, tracked down a worn blueprint of the original landscaping, and had it framed inside the hallway like a piece of art. Then I went outside, pulled up the hedges by hand, and replanted every single bed according to the old plan. Not modern flowers, no neon hybrids, or HOA-approved pastels. No, I filled it with the same varieties listed on the 1946 sheet. Dusty pink climbing roses, boxwoods trimmed into gentle curves, lavender that smelled like summer mornings. Every time I stood back to admire the progress, I felt something inside me settle. Like each repair was stitching up an old wound, both the house's and my own. Of course, the neighbors had their opinions. SUVs slowed to a crawl as I worked. Some folks just stared, pretending they were checking their mirrors. Others took photos discreetly, though not discreetly enough for me to miss. One woman even stopped her morning jog, hands on her hips, and said, "Are you allowed to do all that?" I smiled and told her yes, then asked, "Allowed by who exactly?" She jogged away without answering. Across the street, behind her ever-present curtain, Karen kept watching. Sometimes with binoculars, sometimes with a notebook, sometimes with that expression people wear when they believe everything around them is their responsibility. I noticed she'd started having little sidewalk meetings with other neighbors. She'd gesture toward my house, shake her head, fold her arms. They'd nod, whisper, walk away looking uneasy. But no one approached me. Not yet. Instead, that quiet suburban tension kept building the way summer heat does, slow, invisible, but undeniable. Still, in those days, I shrugged it off. After a life in Boston, a little gossip didn't bother me. Besides, the work kept me grounded. 8 months passed that way. Sunrise to sunset. Coffee, tools, sweat, jazz on the radio. A rhythm that felt more like praying than building. And finally, the house transformed. The stained glass window above the stairwell, the one that once looked like a shattered kaleidoscope, now glowed with cobalt, amber, and wine red when the morning sun hit it. The porch stood level and proud. The roofline straightened like a man standing up after years of being hunched. And for one brief moment, I believed the worst was behind me. But sometimes, peace is just the last breath before the storm rolls in. And mine was coming in fast on 4 black tires, dark tinted windows, and the subtle hum of an SUV engine that didn't belong on a quiet Virginia morning. The morning they showed up, I remember thinking how unusually still everything felt. I was on the porch tightening the last bolt on a railing bracket when I heard the crunch of gravel. Slow, deliberate, heavy. A black SUV rolled to a stop at my gate. Tinted windows, no city plates. Engine idling with that low hum that makes your stomach tighten before your brain even catches up. 2 men stepped out. The first one was tall, too tall for how stiffly he carried himself. Short military-style haircut, mirrored sunglasses, a jaw clenched so tight, he looked like he chewed concrete for breakfast. His shirt looked like a police uniform if someone ordered it off a discount tactical website. Bad-shaped patch, but no real badge. Thick belt, but instead of a sidearm, he carried a cheap taser clipped to his hip. The second man was shorter, broader in the shoulders, hair slicked back, wearing khakis and a button-up with a shiny laminated ID swinging from his belt. On it read, "Inspector, Compliance Division." Compliance with what? He didn't say. They didn't knock, didn't call out, just started walking up the driveway like they owned the place. I wiped my hands on a rag, kept my expression polite, and stepped off the porch. "Morning," I said. The tall one spoke first. His voice had that practiced authority like someone who had watched too many police dramas. "Mr. Pierce." "That's me," I replied. He didn't offer a handshake, didn't smile, just shifted his weight and said, I'm Officer David Lawn, Stonecrest Police Division. I almost laughed. Police Division? Stonecrest wasn't even a real town. It was just the neighborhood name. But I kept my face relaxed, almost confused. Playing dumb was the smartest thing I could do. His partner stepped forward. And this, David continued, is Inspector Ross Lawn. Inspector Ross gave me a slow once-over, then looked up at the restored roofline like it personally offended him. We've received multiple complaints, Ross said. Unauthorized restoration, architectural violations. This structure is not approved under the Stonecrest Legacy HOA standards. I let out a small, confused chuckle. I'm not in your HOA. They exchanged a look. Not a good one. The kind bullies share when their target says something they didn't expect. David cleared his throat. That's debatable. Then he mimicked the stance police use when they want to seem taller. This home is within what we refer to as the visual influence zone of Stonecrest Legacy. That makes it subject to HOA architectural expectations. I raised an eyebrow. Visual influence zone? I repeated it slowly, like I was trying to understand a new vocabulary word. Ross jumped in eagerly. Yes, that means your property affects the harmony and visual continuity of the neighborhood aesthetic. Therefore, is that a legal term? I asked softly. Ross's eyes flickered. For a second, he faltered, then plastered on a tight smile. It's recognized internally. Internally. By the HOA. Not by the city, not by the county, not by the state. Translation, completely made up. I stayed perfectly still, keeping the act going, tilted my head as if genuinely troubled. So, what happens if I don't meet these visual expectations? Ross straightened proudly, taking the bait. Well, if you don't cooperate, we can initiate enforcement. Fees, penalties, or even condemnation if safety issues are found. David added, the city usually sides with us. There it was. The word condemnation. A powerful, dangerous term when used by someone who actually has authority. Criminal if used by someone who doesn't. I widened my eyes just a touch. Condemnation? You mean, tear the place down? It's possible, Ross said calmly. As enforcement officers, we have the authority. I almost clapped. Authority. Officers. He wasn't even trying to hide the lie. But instead of recording it openly, I leaned into my role. I let my voice shake just a little. Okay. I'm not trying to break any rules. I hesitated. Perfectly timed. What exactly do you want from me? Ross pulled a folded piece of paper from his clipboard and tapped it. You have two options, he said, as if reading from a script. 1. You register retroactively with Stonecrest Legacy HOA and pay 3 years dues plus fines. About $18,000 total. David nodded, arms crossed, looking smug. Or, Ross continued, we file an architectural noncompliance notice and begin safety inspection proceedings. And trust me, we always find something. I pretended to swallow hard. 18,000. That's a lot. David's smirk grew. That's the easy option. I let my shoulders slump just enough. Made them believe I was overwhelmed. Then, quietly, I asked, if I pay, do we avoid all the enforcement? Ross leaned in like a salesman closing a deal. Absolutely. I paused, looked down at the gravel. Let silence hang long enough for both of them to think they had me. Then I lifted my head, voice steady. You two finished? Their smiles faded. I held up my phone, screen off, because they didn't need to know it was recording from my pocket camera instead. You're trespassing, I said. And unless you have an actual city-issued warrant in that clipboard, I'm going to need you off my property. Ross stiffened. David's jaw jumped. You're making a mistake, David muttered. No, I replied, stepping back toward my porch. The mistake was assuming I scare easy. They left in a storm of gravel and indignation. And the moment their SUV disappeared down the road, I exhaled, walked inside, and opened a new folder on my laptop. Stonecrest Threat Log, Entry 1. They didn't even give me 24 hours. The next morning, before sunrise, they were back. Same SUV, same territorial crawl up my driveway. I stepped out with my coffee, still in my work boots. This time, they handed me a piece of paper. A stop work order. Right away, I knew it was bogus. The header said Stonecrest Legacy Enforcement Division, Architectural Compliance Unit. A division that didn't exist. The seal was pixelated, literally a blurry JPEG they'd stretched too far. The signature was typed, not written. This is official, Ross lied, looking me dead in the eye. Refusal to comply can escalate to criminal penalties. Criminal? I asked, putting on my scared face again. So you guys can arrest me? We have enforcement authority here, David said immediately. It took everything in me not to grin. Enforcement authority. The phrase that would burn them alive in court. I finally dropped the act. Gentlemen, I said, my voice dropping an octave. Do either of you have a city-issued warrant, a permit, a badge, anything at all that grants you legal jurisdiction on my land? Silence. Just the distant hum of their engine. Leave, I said. You've got 10 seconds before I call the sheriff and report attempted extortion under color of authority. They turned and walked away. No swagger this time. Just fear. As their tires kicked up gravel, I saved the recording. Entry 2. But I knew this wasn't just two idiots on a power trip. There was a brain behind this muscle. And that brain lived across the street. That afternoon, I got a visitor. Not the fake cops, but a real neighbor. An old Ford F-150, faded red, pulled up the drive. Out stepped a man who looked like he was carved from the same oak as my front door. Tall, thin, gray beard, trucker cap pulled low. He shut his door with a gentle click, not a slam. That told me everything. This man respected old things. You Pierce? He asked, voice like gravel on tin. That's me. You've stirred up the hornet's nest, son, he said. He introduced himself as Crane. He pointed toward the cul-de-sac across the tree line. Karen Bullock. She wants control. Always has. What does she want with my house? I asked. Rumor is, she wants your land for an expansion, Crane said. Clubhouse, parking lot, whatever makes her queen bee over a bigger hive. She's been gunning for this hilltop for years, but she needs a clean title and zero historical obstacles. Your restoration? It's ruining her plan to declare the place a teardown. He handed me a folded piece of paper. It was another fake enforcement form, identical to mine, but sent to him, listing him as a witness to my violations. She's dragging the neighbors into it, Crane said. You ain't the first, son, but you might be the first with enough backbone to stop her. Crane left, and I went into research mode. I spent the next 6 hours digging into county records. And there it was. A preliminary inquiry from Stonecrest HOA to the county, dated 3 months before I bought the house. Potential acquisition interest for Parcel 11B for community expansion. Parcel 11B was my land. They didn't care about the aesthetic, they wanted a parking lot. But then I found the smoking gun. A document titled Blight Preparation Outline, Internal Use Only. It was a step-by-step guide on how to force non-HOA properties into foreclosure through fake violations. And the final bullet point? Board president will authorize demolition request if structure declared non-historic. Non-historic. They didn't know. I pulled up the state law. Virginia Historic Structure Preservation Act. Any structure older than 75 years with original architectural components is protected from compulsory alteration or demolition by non-governmental organizations. My house was a fortress, legally speaking. I realized then that defense wasn't enough. I needed to go on the offense. I looked at the property map. There was a narrow, neglected sliver of land right next to mine, for sale for pennies. I bought it instantly. Why? Because with that extra land, combined with my property, I met the acreage requirement to form my own homeowners association. I filed the paperwork that night. The Historic Stonecrest Society. A genuine, state-recognized HOA with one specific charter, to preserve culturally significant structures and prevent aesthetic interference by external bodies. Under Virginia law, historic preservation entities supersede local aesthetic guidelines. My rules trumped Karen's rules. Checkmate. The next few days were a blur of traps and tension. I installed new cameras. I called the real sheriff, Deputy Lawson, and showed him my evidence. He agreed to stake out my property. When the white Ford Explorer rolled up the next morning with the magnetic Community Compliance Unit decal on the side, we were ready. 2 men in blue polos, different guys this time, probably subcontractors, walked up to my porch. We're here for a mandatory safety inspection, one said, flashing a badge he probably printed at Kinko's. If you don't let us in, we can initiate a mandatory entry order. I lifted my phone to record. Mandatory entry? That's right. From the side of the house, Deputy Lawson stepped out. Mind telling me what you're doing on this man's porch? The color drained from their faces faster than water from a broken pipe. Lawson plucked the fake badge from the guy's lanyard. Authorized by who? Etsy. Impersonating a compliance officer is a crime, boys. A real one. He arrested them right there on my driveway. But that was just the appetizer. The main course was the county hearing 2 days later. Karen had petitioned the county to expand her HOA's boundary to include my land, citing visual uniformity. The room was packed. Karen sat there in her eggshell blazer, looking smug, her high-priced lawyer adjusting his cufflinks. Her lawyer gave a speech about community cohesion. Then, my lawyer, Ezra, stood up. He didn't make a speech. He just slid a folder across the table. Madam Hearing Officer, Ezra said, my client's property constitutes a recognized homeowners association under state statute, filed last week. It holds historical preservation priority. That priority supersedes any request by Stone Crest Legacy. Karen shot up. That's absurd. His HOA is one house. One house is enough under historic law, Ezra said calmly. Therefore, Stone Crest is legally barred from expanding into this zone. The hearing officer nodded. Request denied. Karen's mouth fell open, but Ezra wasn't done. Now, regarding the misconduct, he played the videos. The Lawn brothers threatening arrest. The fake compliance officers. The recording of Karen I'd gotten from a disgruntled neighbor where she explicitly said, that house is a scar. If the city won't act, we have other options. Then, he showed the blight preparation outline. Karen's lawyer stood up, pale. I need to withdraw. My client withheld information. I will not risk my license. He walked out. The hearing officer looked at Karen with ice in her eyes. Mrs. Bullock, this evidence shows impersonation, forgery, coercion, and abuse of authority. This matter is being referred to the Commonwealth's attorney for criminal review. Karen tried to speak, but nothing came out. Her empire had crumbled in less than 10 minutes. The aftermath was swift. Karen fled town before the indictment landed, her house up for sale within a week. The Stone Crest board scrambled to refund the compliance fees Karen had embezzled to pay her fake cops. But for me, the victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was the next morning. I walked out onto my porch with a cup of coffee. The air was crisp. The Lawn brothers were gone. Karen was gone. Across the street, a neighbor walked by, someone who used to glare at me. He stopped, looked at my house, and gave me a genuine wave. Good job yesterday, he called out. I walked down to my gate. I had mounted a new brass plaque there. It didn't have threats or warnings. It simply read, Registered Historical Property. Protected by history, not by HOA. Mr. Crane walked up, leaning on his cane, smiling that knowing smile. Neighborhood feels quieter, he said. Quieter is good, I replied. You didn't do it to see her punished, Crane said, tapping the plaque. You did it so they couldn't do it to the next guy. Yeah, I said. I guess I did. I looked back at my house. The stained glass caught the morning light, painting the foyer in cobalt and wine red. The mahogany arch glowed. It wasn't just a project anymore. It wasn't a battlefield. It was a home. And as I sat there, listening to the cicadas and the distant hum of traffic, I realized I had found exactly what I left Boston looking for. Not just a house, but a place where I could stand my ground. A place where the lines were drawn not by a clipboard, but by respect. So, if you're out there, dealing with a tyrant in a blazer who thinks they own your view, remember this. They only have power as long as you play by their rules. But the moment you open the history books, the moment you find the truth, well, even the strongest empire can fall to a single man with a plan and a recording device. What would you have done? Would you have taken the $18,000 deal just to make it go away? Or would you have fought? Let me know in the comments. And if you ever drive through Virginia and see an old mansion with a brass plaque on the gate, give a wave. We're finally at peace here. Thanks for listening.